Nancy Norway, and this is Nancy Norway Presents Windmills. I've chosen the theme windmills for 3 reasons. The first is that windmills are very beautiful. Everyone likes to see the windmill against the beautiful sky. And the people that'll be on my show are beautiful people. Secondly, windmills are productive. If they're in the orange groves, they help bring up water to irrigate the groves, the trees. And they can also help grind grain at a mill. Out in the desert, they create electricity. So they're very productive, and the people that will be on my show are very productive people. The third reason I've chosen the theme windmills is because windmills are flexible. They have to shift with the wind in order to catch the wind. Sometimes life throws us curves that we don't want or expect, and we have to shift with the wind in order to keep going. The people that will be on my show will be people that have done this, that are making a positive contribution to the world around them. So for these 3 reasons, beauty, productivity, and flexibility, I've chosen the theme windmills. Would to God that all of our lives were beautiful like windmills. Hi, this is Nancy Norway, and we're doing Nancy Norway Presents. Today, it's all about veterans. We're out here at E.E. Wilson at the Veterans Memorial. There's a little bit of Oregon history here. This used to be Camp Adair, where lots of guys were stationed during World War II. And we're going to introduce you during the show to several veterans, some live interviews and some pictures, and we'll go down memory lane here. But the message we want to get out is that we don't want to forget any of our vets. They gave themselves, a lot of them gave lives for our country and to keep the rest of us safe. And we want to honor that, but we also want to honor the ones that go out there and just do the regular routine. Even if they didn't get medals and were heroic, they went. And you never know what's going to happen with the battles, and we just appreciate everybody's service to our country. So welcome to the show, and let's go down Veteran Lane.
Hi, I'm Sue Hansen, and I'm standing here in the Camp Adair Memorial Garden at E.E. Wilson Wildlife Area. This area, at one time in World War II, it was a camp training 4 infantry divisions for the European campaign. The Memorial Garden was created for our veterans, for the 4 infantry divisions here, but is for the public as well. It is now E.E. Wilson Wildlife Area. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife takes care of the Memorial Garden. My husband Eric and I, we host here a couple months every year to fix it up before Memorial Day with flowers and flags and whatnot. Camp Adair was also named after Henry Adair, who was killed in 1916 during the Mexican Wars with Pancho Villa. So this is in his memory. He was an early Oregon pioneer as well.
Before we got into the war, the top brass was thinking we might, so they were looking around the West Coast to find places to train soldiers. And some people that were local here advocated for Camp Adair to be a place. So they picked it. After Pearl Harbor, the decision came quickly. And between 1942 and 1944, 100,000 troops were trained here. That's a lot. It was the 2nd largest city in Oregon at the time. The 96th Infantry Division, they were actually here first in August of 42, and then the Timberwolves came later. And these guys were called the Deadeyes. They were activated under Major General James L. Bradley and Brigadier General Claudius Easley. August 42 to May of 43, they were here, that division, the 96th. And then when they went off and fought, they fought in the Pacific Theater, the Battle of Okinawa, and they got a Presidential Unit Citation for heroic service during the Battle of Okinawa, which was approved in 2001. The 96th Infantry Division is now one of only 4 entire Army divisions awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for heroic action excuse me, during World War II. General Claudius Miller Easley died just before the end of the battle. The division gained the connotation of the Deadeyes because of the high level of marksmanship it achieved through training directed by General Easley. The 104th Infantry Division, called the Timberwolves. They were activated here under General Gilbert Cook. And later, they were sent overseas, and they fought, I'm looking, in the European theater, Belgium and Holland, marching into the heart of Germany in the final days of the European War. 195 consecutive days of combat, and they liberated one of the concentration camps, Nordhausen, Germany. After those two units, you had the next one, which was the 91st Infantry Division, Powder River. And some of these were sent off, and then they got others here. So those guys went off to war, and then came the 91st Infantry Division from November of 43 to March of 44. And then they went off to fight in the Mediterranean theater, North Africa to Italy. They began combat at Anzio, and ended with the Po Valley campaign. The 4th Division that was stationed at Campadere was the 70th Division, and it was activated as a component of the Army of the United States on June 15, 1943, and they're called the Trailblazers. And they're so named after the pioneers that crossed the Oregon Trail. They trained at Campadere under Major General Johnny Dahlquist after the 96th Infantry Division left. So they were here from June of 43 to July of 44. And then they went on to fight in the European theater, 83 days of combat, and they liberated 58 towns. So we'd like to honor all these veterans today. So we watched the memorial. Now it's E.E. Wilson Wildlife Refuge out there. And you'll see the memorial as it looks today. Thank you.
Here we are at Camp Adair, which is named after Lieutenant Henry Adair, who fought against Pancho Villa in New Mexico during the 1916 raid when Pancho Villa came across the United States border and attacked the United States. And this whole area is now a fish and wildlife area. When the Army left in 1948, they deeded it over to the state as a wildlife area. I'm here standing by an American flag, and I have a story about my father, who was a World War II vet that passed away about 7 years ago. He happened to be in the 1st Cavalry Division, which was the first American soldiers onto Japanese homeland soil after the signing of the peace treaty. The 1st Cavalry was the color guard for MacArthur, and they drove to the U.S. Embassy, and my father raised the flag at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, believe it, on August 9th, after the signing of the peace treaty.
We've moved over in front of the National Guard here in Corvallis, Oregon, but we're at the Benton County Veterans Memorial, which really has nothing to do with the National Guard, but this is where it is. Notice the American flag up at the top of the flagpole, and under that is the POW, Missing in Action, Prisoners of War flag. On the other flagpole is the Oregon state flag. The Benton County Veterans Memorial honors vets from all the different wars since World War I. These are the ones who have fallen in the wars, all the way up through Iraqi freedom today. We really appreciate their service for us. Hi, this is Les Whittle, and he'll be talking to us about this whole memorial. Welcome to the show, Les.
Thank you, Nancy. As you said, my name is Les Whittle. I am the organizer of this Benton County Veterans Memorial, and what you just had a picture of was the memorial that we put on to honor the Purple Heart recipients, and that's the second one that's in the state of Oregon. The first one's in McMinnville, and then we have this tribute paid to the Purple Heart recipients here.
Benton County didn't have one?
No, Benton County didn't have anything at all. And at that point, I put about 2.5 years in researching out the names to go on the memorial, to have the names on the Wall of Honor, which we call that. They have to be killed in action. not just a non-hostile death, but they do have to be killed in action in some way, and also a member of the Benton County schools or born here or something like that. Okay, Nancy, I'd like to introduce my two friends. On my right is Muriel Hilliard. She's a World War II vintage. And on my left is Steve Bessie. Steve is a World War II veteran who served in the landing of Normandy. And at that point has quite an interesting story of his life and career as the United States Navy. And I am also in the United States Navy during the Korean time. And I would be very happy to share with you a little bit about the memorial. At this point, the memorial has 119 names on the Wall of Honor, the black granite. And at that time, I researched those names out, and they are basically killed in action from Benton County. The names on the benches are also on the wall, but they represent areas of Benton County. For an example, the young Larry Gassner represents the forest industry to the west in Benton County. On to the other one, Vernon Schrock represents agriculture and farming to the south. And so each of the benches have names on them, but they represent an area of the county. The 41st Infantry Division, this plaque was put into this memorial by Ed Scobo, who was a member of the old 41st. And the 41st was a World War II, and most generally served most of their time in New Guinea. And they had some terrible assignments with the Japanese, and they had some conditions that they had just about as bad. The snakes and everything else there, the swamps was almost as bad as the Japanese. But anyway, the old 41st is a takeoff of the National Guard during World War II that was activated. I put this memorial together some 14, 15 years ago, and I did the research on all the names from Benton County that had been killed in action, starting with World War I. And at that point, we went from World War I to World War II, and of course the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And then we just recently wrapped up the Iraqi freedom. The memorial was designed to be a wall of honor for veterans who have been killed from Benton County. But the center tablet, if you'll see that one, it says this memorial is dedicated to all veterans, men and women, living or dead. So this means that every veteran is this memorial also. The Wall of Honor does list the names of those who have been killed in action, but I first want to make sure that it's understood that this is an all veterans memorial dedicated to, to all veterans.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
It looks like we lost a lot of people in World War II.
World War II is, of course, the largest number of casualties, but I think it's one point of interest for Benton County. Per capita, Monroe and that general area had a higher loss of World War II veterans and right on in through the Vietnam conflict. If you notice the eternal flame up above, that eternal flame is designed specifically so that we will not forget any veteran, and certainly those who have been killed in action. So the eternal flame is like it says, we will never forget. And we don't want to forget any of these.
Right, and that's the point of this show, to not forget.
Right.
I wanted to honor all the veterans from all the wars, and even the ones that were enlisted and didn't see huge action. We care that they went too.
Sure.
Because you never know when war is going to start. Look at 9/11, it came out of nowhere.
That's right.
And we really need people to defend our country's freedom, and we're so grateful to those who did. Just answer one question about the World War II vets. Were a lot of them like on Normandy, or was there any particular time?
You know, the veterans that we have on this memorial is a variety. During World War II, they served in all capacities. And I'm sure some of them were in Normandy and others were in hostilities, you know, in the Philippines and other areas.
Okay.
But all the names on the wall were killed in action, in hostility.
Right.
And
Now, you were in the Korean War.
yes.
So talk to me about that one, because a lot of people don't even know about the Korean War. We didn't get taught it in school.
Yeah.
They just never got there, actually. Usually the social studies teachers never got to up to where we are today. So we just
Okay.
didn't ever learn.
Well, Nancy, I have to share with you, I am a Korean veteran, but I was not in the area of hostilities on the front line. And I have a lot of friends who were, and they went through some very, very tough, you know, situations. And certainly in this case, they had a kind of a handicap. They could only do so much. Perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I guess the government did control some of that, and it's like handcuffs on, you know, on some of them.
So I just asked him about the policies that our government has about winning versus containing, and when all that changed, and how he feels about that.
Well, Nancy, I have to say that I missed World War II by a couple years. My brothers were all in World War II, and during that time, there was absolutely no time in our history where patriotism was so high.
Right.
Now, that patriotism carried over to some degree at the beginning in the Korean conflict. Cool. Then, as the Korean conflict continued, it was much like Iraqi freedom and Afghanistan. It started out with a lot of patriotism, and that patriotism then kind of waned off. And the government basically, when you're talking about containment, I think the services still have the feeling of wanting to win,
Of
no
course.
question.
That's normal.
Yeah. But I think the thing that we saw, in particularly in Korea, that we wound up coming back to the 38th parallel, and we more or less said, "Hey, let's quit," you know,
Okay.
and we pulled out. And
So who decided, hey, let's quit? The
well,
higher-ups?
the higher-ups,
Okay.
yeah. At that point,
Yeah, tell me why they decided that.
well, I wish I knew, but I think there was a situation where it was either to go all the way back. And, you know, General MacArthur wanted to go right on into China. And nobody wanted to take on China at that point. And when they went back to the borders of China, that's when China pretty much got into it, because they wasn't for sure if we were going to keep on coming. So, you know, I think we could see that. But I think most people saw the 38th parallel was accomplished, what they really wanted. It was established now, the North and the South, and basically what we were representing is South Korea.
So how would you feel and the others feel, because the Koreas have been divided now?
Yes.
So talk to me about how the end of the war left it and how that's played out.
You're asking some pretty hard questions, Dan. But at that point, we saw the split of North and South Korea, you know, or basically established South Korea, which South Korea then went on to be a very strong democratic country. And we see today that the North Korea is still the communist rule, but South Korea has now come along and has done extremely well in their own country, politically, economically. So I think in that case, those who were probably involved with that see, if nothing else, that has become a very big success.
It's true that there is no like peace treaty. It was just they agreed to have this line. Can you explain that, please?
Well, I don't. I think you're probably right as far as a true peace treaty goes, but they did establish, and that was agreed upon, the 38th parallel. So you can say that is really the peace treaty. because both North and South agreed not to go across a zone known as the 38th parallel. And sometimes that has been very testy, but other times, why, it has worked, reasonably well.
So Les, could you tell me what you did during the Korean War? What was your task?
Well, then I was in the United States Navy, and at that point I had gone through boot camp in San Diego, followed that through a radiation school, and during my time in radiation school I was exposed to several levels of high radiation during the school time. And we was a little concerned with that because we didn't know what that would mean, and we were told that don't worry about it, it would dissipate. Giving the Navy the advantage of that, and at least the advantage, I don't believe they honestly knew the long-term effects that it would have on us later on in life. And it certainly, has had a lot of people, including myself, had that problem. I went through radiation school in San Diego and immediately was transferred to Kwajalein Island and put in special programs and got involved with the hydrogen bomb test off of Anahuitl. And the hydrogen bomb test, of course, was only about 300 miles away, and now for the next 14 months, our water was caught on the runway, and you know in your heart that water had to be contaminated from fallout. We swam in the ocean with ducks so sick that you didn't think too much about being contaminated, but today you do know the waters were contaminated as well as drinking water. And certainly in this case, after 14 months, it just added to my problems of radiation from radiation school. I would not trade, though, the 4 years I spent in the Navy because I had some super people. The officers I worked with were outstanding men and women, and certainly in this case, I had a chance to grow up myself. And so at that point, I look at my future. I did come back. I was in business for a good number of years. I taught business for a good number of years and had 2 careers. And I have 3 children that I'm very proud of. And now I have 5 grandchildren.
That's wonderful, Les. That's wonderful. Thank you for serving our country.
Well, thank you, Nan.
And endangering yourself like that. I'm so sorry, and it is true. I think back then they didn't know.
Yeah, I think so too.
About the radiation. I work in the movie industry, so I worked in southwestern Utah, and that's when they were testing some of the bombs
Sites,
out in Nevada. And they told the people, well, pack lunches and come out and let's watch. So people there too endangered themselves, and a lot of them died of cancer.
Right.
Do you know if any of your fellow Navy people got cancer or anything?
Oh yeah, the Japanese fishing fleet was 750 miles away, which was better than twice the distance that we were. The wind was not blowing in our direction, fortunately, but unfortunately it was blowing in the Japanese fleet. If there's any Japanese fishermen or fleet alive that was in that, it would first be a miracle. Second, they would probably be in the hospitals in the United States. But we were lucky that the wind was not in our direction, or we certainly would have had fallout like the Japanese. They lost hair, they lost skin, and many of those died. By the way, this bench is Ed Silver. He's still missing in action during the Vietnam War. Steve, my friend, longtime friend, this is Steve Bessie. Steve is a World War II vet. He was involved with the landing of Normandy. And I think probably rather than for me to ask questions, Steve, how about you giving a little bit of a highlight? I think, were you a 90-day wonder?
Yes, I was.
What's a 90-day wonder?
90-day wonder is one who goes through midshipman school and in 33 months receives your commission.
Yeah.
I went to Columbia University immediately on graduation from college. Got my commission at Columbia University as an ensign in the Navy. went on training, was then assigned as executive officer of an LCI, a landing craft infantry. On the LCI, we trained off of Maryland for about 3 months, then put our ship, the LCI 420, in commission in Boston.
Wow. Do you know a guy named Douglas Falconer by any chance?
Doug Falconer and I are very good friends. He was executive officer on another LCI. He served in the Pacific. I served in the Atlantic. We both went to Columbia University.
Yes, that's excellent. That's wonderful. When I talked to him, he said it was pretty intensive.
Very, very intensive training. And then when we were in England, we had more intensive training for trial landings on beaches in England, knowing it was in preparation for the invasion.
What he told me was that they needed more officers. They didn't have enough. And that's why they instituted this program and trained you all and then put you right out in the war. He said it was in the middle of the war. Were you the middle of the war early on?
Well, the war was well underway when we were doing our training, and they put us in action as early as they could. We had to do the training. It was different than in the Pacific. They were jumping island to island in the Pacific. We had one major invasion, and that was Normandy. On Normandy, we sailed from England on the 5th of June, 1944, and then were in the first wave at Omaha Beach on June 6th. That was D-Day, and it was pretty horrendous.
Decision day, right?
It was decision day, and there were, in our group of LCIs, there were 5 ships, 5 LCIs in our particular group. Ours was the only one that got off the beach. We lost the other 4.
Oh, that's so sad. Are there names on this memorial?
No, they were not from Oregon.
Okay. So people were just assigned all over, however.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Wow, how awful. How long were you actually on the ground with France?
Well, we actually did not, I did not even step ashore in France.
Right, because you were the executive officer. Of
We,
the
we carried, on an LCI, we carried 200 troops. We had sleeping quarters for 200. And then they departed the ship on ramps on each side of the ship. Walked down ramps onto the beach. What an LCI would do, we'd come up to the beach and land on the beach, maybe in shallow water. We'd drop our ramps, the soldiers would take off and go on to fight the battles. We would back off, go out 10 miles, pick up other troops, come back in, unload another group, then go back out 10 miles to transports, load more troops, bring them back in and land again.
So what happened to the ones that survived there? They were stuck there for a while.
Well, they were stuck for a while right close to the beach because they were unable to advance because there was too much armament by the Germans.
long did that battle last?
Well, for 2 days it was uncertain at Omaha Beach. Other beaches were secured much quicker, but Omaha Beach they had brought in extra German soldiers. They had German 88s that were pounding us continually, and it made it very difficult to get further inland.
And that's where you were? Omaha.
That's where I was.
Wow, well thank you so much for your service. After that, what happened? You still, same thing?
We worked, we went back to England, loaded up a load of nurses, brought those back for landing to support the troops. One occasion we tied up on a barge, 2 LCIs on a barge that was loaded with 1,000 tons of open ammunition, took those in under horrendous gunfire and landed it on the beach.
Wow, so it's a miracle you're alive.
You're right, it is a miracle that I survived.
Would you give God any credit for that? Did this intensify your faith at all?
Oh yes, it certainly did.
Oh my gosh. I've seen the movie that Steven Spielberg did, except most of it, how realistic is it?
It was very realistic. It really was.
The opening scenes were very real.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just exactly like that.
Yeah, and I think he intended it to be an honor to vets
Yeah.
too. Wow.
Well, it makes me appreciate what we have here in this country.
Right. I think all of us appreciate what we have here in this country, and we're really grateful to people like you and like Les and all the others that have fought to keep us free. I know even now there's wars going on over there that in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and we're still trying to preserve our freedom, and we really, really appreciate you risking your life many times. It sounds like you went back several times under heavy fire. Oh my gosh. When you took the nurses, had they secured the beach? Or?
We'd secured the beaches when we took the nurses.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
They were ministering to all the
yeah,
people
they were back far enough, but the nurses then got into close combat, or near close combat very shortly.
And then did you help afterwards take the people from the beach back?
We would take wounded back to England.
Okay. And so you went back and forth?
Yeah.
So that was the year before the war ended, right?
That was in June of '44, and
right. So it took about another year.
Yeah.
And
not quite.
Victory in Europe Day was
in March.
It was in March.
Yeah, March of '45.
Oh, okay. And then it took longer for Japan.
Yeah, I think the final end was what, August of '45.
Okay.
With Japan.
Yeah, with Japan.
Wow.
There's no way that this country could have done what they did during World War II without the home front. The people on the home front were so patriotic that you just didn't hear about the quibbling of not having a steak tonight for dinner. You saw people sacrificing and doing it willingly. You saw women stepping up and taking on the roles of men's job, like the saying of Rosie the Riveter. That's a true story.
Oh, wow.
And so in this case, we saw many, many women do things that they had never done ever before.
My wife worked in a lumber company on the chainsaw.
Wow.
Muriel, for an example,
Yeah.
is very active in helping veterans. She is a American Legion Auxiliary member of 58 years.
Wow.
60 years, sorry about
years
that.
when I get my new bed.
But in that length of time, the American Legion, of course, is designed around the veterans membership. And but she has been very instrumental in Operation Iraqi Freedom. She and I worked a lot in sending the guys boxes to help at least give some kind of a positive influence back from the home front. So Muriel,
Like my history.
Sure.
yeah. Okay,
I
Muriel.
was around during World War II. I lived at a military base, Fort Winfield, Scott, which is the top of the Presidio of San Francisco. My husband was in charge of the harbor defense for the San Francisco area. So I got the real feeling of World War II from being a military wife. I have a daughter that was born in a military hospital in San Francisco.
Didn't a lot of the troops come back via San Francisco? I know my dad did.
Yes, they did. I worked as a civilian worker at Fort Baker Hospital. I interviewed all of the medical patients that came in on ships from the Asian theater. If they started out on a troop ship, they went to the Presidio. But if they got ill on the ship, they had to clear through Fort Baker, and my job was to interview them and give the interview to the doctors.
Wow, that's important.
So I was pretty close.
Okay. Can you talk to us about the flags and the flowers here at the memorial?
During the Memorial Day ceremony, there will be 3 flags there and 3 flags here. They will be the service flags of the Army, Navy, Marine, Coast Guard, Air Force.
Great. That
One
was fun.
more.
That was fun.
Anyhow, they'll all be up here. The memorial service is a beautiful service.
Yeah, get close to the mic and then talk to us about the memorial.
Well, Les can tell you more about it than I can, but we're both part of it up here. It's really something. You'll have to see it to believe it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Muriel is sharing too is the flags will be at half-staff. The 25-foot poles will be at half-staff. And then the surface flags will be all the service flags itself. They start out with the U.S. flag, go to the POW MIA flag, and then it goes to the branches of service. And when the wind is blowing and the flags are unfurling a little bit, it is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, tell us about the memorial service.
Okay, we have pretty much, this man here has been a supporter of the memorial from almost day one. And but we are now in the middle of developing the Memorial Day program for May 30th at 2 o'clock. And
Is it right here?
Right here.
Right here.
We'll have 600 chairs set up out in the lawn. And at that point, we have a flyover. The flyover will be from either 1 or 2, Army jets.
Nice.
And it's a real honor to have the flyover. You don't always get it. But we are paying tribute this year to the families, all families, who have lost a son or a daughter or a husband, or I guess a wife now. And we are calling this a Gold Star Family Presentation. The family, the Schrock family, will be the ones doing the honors representing the Gold Star for all the families who've lost a son or a daughter.
That's wonderful. I hope that anybody that's seen this show can come out on May 30th. It's at Kings at 2 p.m. at Kings
And
Boulevard and Lincoln and park wherever. And
yeah, the street will
up
be
and down
closed.
everywhere.
Yeah, we will.
Oh, the street will be closed. Okay.
We close
Talk
that
about
to
that.
traffic because we have about 600 to 800 in attendance. And we just don't want to take the risk that somebody would get hit by a car.
Of course, that would be terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Okay, Nancy, I think you asked a question which I perhaps am not the greatest qualified to answer, but I will give my feeling. And I think one of the things was how well received were veterans when they came home. And I can say in the Korean War, which I was in, they consider that as the forgotten war. And I think the reason they call that, because World War II, when the vets came home in World War II, they had the GI Bill. Every person was in college that wanted to go. Terrific welcome home. And in the Korean conflict, you'd have to say, was there a win or was there a loss? Because everything was wrapped up at the 38th parallel. So you didn't see the big welcome home that we really won this thing in a big way. And I think that's probably true to some degree with Vietnam. Vietnam came in and people were more and more hostile about what was taking place. We shouldn't be there. And certainly in this case, there was no question about getting involved with the Vietnam veterans, which I can't really say, you know, or answer them. Some will tell you they were spit on. I have never seen that, and I don't want to see that. But I will say that there is a question, once again, of coming home with kind of the feeling of unfinished business. And I think that's why we didn't see a big welcome home for either the Korean or the Vietnam conflict.
And I might add one thing to that. On the World War II, when we came home from World War II, there was jubilation, and total jubilation. And it was a totally different thing than particularly the Vietnam War.
And you had a clear victory, too.
We had a clear victory.
Clear victory. Saved the world from Hitler.
Okay, Nancy, a friend of mine walked up by the name of Pat Landers, who is the daughter of John Landers Jr., and a long-time friend of mine, and we're in Qantas together, and we're in all kinds of stuff together. John is a World War II veteran, much like Steve, and John was a forward observer, I think a first lieutenant or second lieutenant, and it was in kind of the Battle of the Bulge that he was this forward observer. The Germans was really throwing everything they had, tanks and the whole ball of wax. And it turned out to be John's part of the front line is exactly where they attacked. John was with his radioman, and the radioman panicked, and John told him to stay. He panicked, got up and run, probably about 50 feet. The Germans cut him down. And John wound up staying then by himself, his own radioman, and at that point he was calling in artillery as close as 50 feet to his own foxhole. And by staying and being a brave, this man is a true hero. By doing that, he not only knocked out German tanks, but he knocked out a whale amount of the German infantry. Without a doubt, I have written some work on John, some things for medals, and at this point, there is no question in my mind that John saved hundreds and possibly thousands of men and could have been the demise of the entire 7th Army Division. And if it would have even split the 7th Army Division, it would have delayed the surrender of Germany. And so John today is very ill. He has had a stroke, and but you would never meet a more friendly, outgoing guy than John Landers. And but at this point, we're trying our best. He's got a stack full of medals already, and certainly very well deserving the Congressional Medal of Honor, because quite often you'll see where somebody has saved one life or saved even maybe their own life. Well, this guy has saved hundreds or thousands of lives. And there's about 4 letters in his file of men who served with John, but not for John, but saw him out front and praised the man for saving their lives as well as thousands of others. So yeah, anyway, John was wounded. He has a Purple Heart. I don't think he maybe has a couple of Purple Hearts. And I know he has a Silver Star and other huge medals too. Yeah. Nancy, I'd like for you to meet a longtime friend. And once again, I've seen this little girl, from a little girl up to a beautiful married lady with kids. This is Pat Hollenbeck. This is John Landers' daughter. And I think maybe in fairness to John, and John is not here today, he's had a stroke. And Pat mentioned a medal that John is extremely proud of. So Pat, would you share that?
Nancy, Dad has a British Service Cross, which has been given to few men. And
not many.
not many. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Because he served in Britain?
France.
No, but he helped save the British.
Right, as well as
And-
everybody else.
Yeah.
And it may be comparable to the
It is.
Congressional Medal of Honor.
Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
It is when it's British.
Yeah, it's comparable to the Congressional Medal of Honor, but from Britain.
Thank you. Be sure to thank him from us, too.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll
For serving.
will do.
Yeah.
We've got him hoping to get him on one of the honor flights, but the money is not coming in very
Yeah.
rapidly in Oregon for
Yeah.
those World War II veterans to get to see
fly back to Washington free of charge because he's a World War II vet.
and to see the memorial.
Mm-hmm.
And they take all the states have got honor flights going at no cost, and they treat them like royalty when they're there. And
They need to.
They fly them there, and you know, like Pat says, they just really do put the red carpet.
Well, I've called to the gal in Grants Pass that's doing it, and he's like 100. He's
Way
number
down the
100
list.
or something.
Is the fact that he's had the stroke?
No.
Everybody's got something
Everybody,
medical.
yeah.
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 Anyway, Nancy, I wanted you to meet Pat because John is extremely well known in this community and well regarded and well respected. If you ever wanted to have a barbecue, you call John Landry.
We're still doing the show for veterans and honoring veterans in honor of this Memorial Day. So I have two soldiers here with us, and they're going to introduce themselves and tell us what it was like in the most recent war.
My name is Staff Sergeant Scott Young. I'm with the Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 162nd Infantry, the Oregon Army National Guard.
I'm Sergeant Andrew Campbell, and I'm also with Bravo Company, 162.
Great. So where were you stationed in Iraq? What part?
We were at Talil, Iraq.
Where's that?
It's about, as the crow flies, it was about 100, 150 miles south of Baghdad.
Wow. Did either of you participate in the ride into Baghdad?
No.
No.
That was pretty sure. So tell us what you did over there.
I'm the supply sergeant, so I was responsible for making sure all the equipment was there in good order, working the way it was supposed to.
Great.
And I was the armorer, the unit armorer for our most recent deployment.
So you check out the weapons to people, or?
Yes, as well as inspect and repair
Oh,
whatever's
good.
at my level. And
Do people keep the weapons with them, or do they have to check them out to go fight?
no, they have them with them the entire deployment.
I was going to say, because if you get attacked.
Exactly.
It was hot, right?
At one point, I think our thermometer we had topped out at 140, and it was topped out.
Oh my God.
But then again, in the winters, it got equally as cold too. I think we got down to about 18 degrees one day.
Ooh, that's Fahrenheit, and that's above
Yes.
0?
Yes.
Oh, that's still horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was without the wind chill. So I don't know.
Oh, man. So what in the world do you do? I mean, do you wear these outfits, or do you take some off when it's hot and you have to clean and stuff?
Not much we can do when it's hot. When it's cold, you just add on more layers.
What's the morale of the troops?
I think it's great. Our mission was convoy security. There isn't a whole lot of knocking down doors over there anymore, which is normally what an infantry company as ourselves would do. But for this deployment, we were convoy security. Morale was generally pretty high.
Because it's better now, right? A lot of bombings.
We had very few when we were there.
When were you there?
We were there from July 2009 through April of last year, 2010.
Okay. And they're drawing the troops down now, so
Yes.
And the ones that are left are just doing civil things, right? Civilian type.
As far as I know, I don't know. I'm not there.
So, how many American troops would be in like one camp or whatever? Were there a lot of you? Did you have friends?
Oh yes,
We isolated all over the place.
the entire 41st Brigade, which is what 2nd Battalion belongs to, was deployed over there. The brigade, we took, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 soldiers, maybe a little bit more than that. And the brigade was spread all throughout Iraq in various locations. Even our battalion of 5 different companies was spread out over 3 different locations.
So that battalion is all Oregonians, or that's everybody?
Yes, we actually had some troops from South Carolina and Delaware that were attached to us, to the battalion for the deployment. They were actually co-located with us where we were on Tallil.
Well, we really appreciate your service for our country.
Absolutely, thank you.
Because you guys, you've enlisted, right?
Yes.
Before there were drafts, but more, so you actually chose to go into the military. We really appreciate it. Because all the terrorist attacks we don't have is because of what you're doing over there.
You're absolutely welcome.
Do you have any pearls of wisdom to give to soldiers that are about ready to deploy?
Just do what you're told.
Take electric fans?
Facility-wise, it is pretty good. I mean, as far as battling the heat, everybody lives in what's now called, in short term, a CHU or CHU, containerized housing unit, which all have air conditioning, heaters. So it's not too bad unless you have to spend extended periods of time outside in it. Otherwise, it's not so bad.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The Bible says to give honor to whom honor is due. So this Memorial Day weekend, we want to give honor to all the people who have fought to keep our country's freedoms for us. We want to wish them well and God's blessings. And we also wish God's blessings to you and that God would bless America. I'm sure that all the servicemen today would appreciate our prayers for them to stay safe and to have wisdom and strength as they serve our country every place that they are. I know they appreciate chocolate chip cookies too. Anyway, if we could keep them in our thoughts and prayers, that would be a wonderful thing and would encourage them. I interviewed 2 guys back from Iraq, and they said they were thrilled when they went through various airports and people would, just whole groups of people would come up to them and thank them profusely for serving our country. And that's the right attitude. That's wonderful that we who are home and who don't have to go through all the hardships, all the dangers, all the heat, the cold, the explosives that blow everybody up over there, we should truly tell them how thankful we are for their service for us. Don't forget to come to the memorial service, May 30th at 2 p.m. There'll be a flyover. Pray for good weather. Happy Memorial Day to everybody. As we end the show, we want to pray God's blessing on America. Here we have a picture of Douglas Falconer holding God Bless America.
We've shown you the flag that was flown in the actual battle over there. On Iwo Jima, he kept the flag. That was one of the pictures. And we're thankful that God spared the lives of those who he did spare. And we want to pray blessings on all of our vets and all of the ones in active service today. So let's listen to the song as we watch Douglas Falcon of God Bless America.